My name's Chris or Christopher Woodbridge, nickname's Woody. My first contract in the Marine Corps was 1983. I served on active duty as an infantry officer from 1988 till I retired in 2015. Major deployments, deployment program to the Okinawa and the Western Pacific, Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, multiple MUSOC deployments throughout the mid-90s, and then two deployments during or actually three deployments during OIF, and then multiple deployments during OEF. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. Grew up in New York City. I came from sort of a military family. My father was an Army veteran, Korean War era, and he was extremely interested in military history, reenacting, militaria, collecting. So I grew up around a lot of other veterans, World War II through Vietnam era veterans, and I became interested in the Marine Corps to piss off my dad. Because he had, in the late 40s, tried to enlist in the Marine Corps prior to Korea, and they wouldn't take him. He was colorblind. And so he went in the Army instead and served in the Army. But he sort of had a lingering bone to pick with the Marine Corps for not letting him in, for not letting him serve in the Marines. And so when I had the opportunity, again, not more. I think most Marines, join for a number of reasons. Impressing their parents or impressing somebody is one of them. That was certainly part of it. But also growing up in that environment, I wanted to serve the nation. There's a lot of patriotism at that time in the early 80s. This was the Reagan era, and so being in the military was cool again, and I wanted to have the opportunity to gain those experiences that you get when you serve in a military organization, particularly an infantry organization, combat unit. I wanted to lead Marines in combat from the time I came in as a lieutenant. And I had the opportunity to do that over the 30 years, like a lot of other folks who came in at that time. And so 7th Marines, which had been based in Camp Pendleton, was going to be moved in its entirety to Twentynine Palms and be permanently stationed out in the desert. And so there was a kind of a break point, depending on how much time Marines had left in the battalion on their current assignment. Those who had enough time had to go to Twentynine Palms, had to vacate whatever base housing, grab their families if they had families, and drive 2.5 hours up the hill to the high desert and move into Twentynine Palms, which was not completely ready for this influx of humanity. At that point, the only battalion out there had been 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, and 1st Battalion, 4th Marines was redesignated 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, and the rest of 7th Marines went out to the high desert as directed by that move in the Marine Corps. We didn't have armory space. We didn't really have barracks space. We had very old squad base style barracks, and so it was a little bit of a challenge to move the battalion out there. But eventually, we started getting plussed up with new Marines. We had inherited a lot of the non-deployable Marines from 1-4, and so we started building the battalion back. And our battalion commander at the time was Lieutenant Colonel Jim Mattis. And so, his hands-on, at times intrusive leadership style was really key to, again, rebuilding the battalion in that situation. And his goal was to build that cohesion in the unit And we were able to do that because, again, we planned on a training deployment. In this case, in the summer of 1990, to Bridgeport, California, to the Mountain Warfare Training Center, to go through the summer battalion mountain operations package, is referred to as the ROC package, as opposed to the winter package, which is obviously the ice package. And so, while we're out there going through the platoon, company, crawl, walk, run level, basic military mountaineering, mountain operations piece of that package, I was at the time assigned as the battalion's Heavy Machinegun Platoon commander, which, among other things, in the battalion mountain package meant animal husbandry. You become qualified as mule skinners, and you use some of the last working mules in the military inventory of the U.S., but certainly in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is, to this day, the only service that still maintains operational working pack animal training at Bridgeport. And so for the weapons, the platoons of weapons company, 81 millimeter mortar platoon, the Dragons anti-armor platoon, and the heavy machine guns platoon, you learn to use the specialized saddles to put your heavy equipment on the mules, load your ammunition on the mules, how to handle the mules, how to lead them through the mountains, what not to do with a mule, because they're just like you read about, very stubborn, and they'll do terrible things to you if you overload them. But that, and learning different techniques of rope work, how to move the heavy equipment, the heavy machine guns up rock faces, and so we were happily going through that package when we learned that Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait, and that immediately changed our plans for egressing, for returning to Twentynine Palms. We had planned on doing I think it was roughly 34-mile battalion hike over the Sweetwater Mountains to an airfield to get out of Bridgeport, to go back to Twentynine Palms. That was normally a bus trip or a truck trip for battalions, but again, trying to build that unit cohesion in the best way possible. Then Lieutenant Colonel Mattis had a plan and had reconned a route for us to hike up and over the Sweetwaters to Sweetwater Airfield in the Sierra Nevadas. That had to be scrapped. That hike plan for the battalion had to be scrapped because we immediately, buses, planes, back to Twentynine Palms within about 48 hours from notification, and then another roughly 48 hours before we got all of our equipment, got our desert utilities issued, got other combat equipment issued, and bused down to March Air Force Base in Southern California and got on aircraft to Saudi Arabia. And then we were the first infantry battalion, Marine infantry battalion, to close, to get the whole battalion to Saudi Arabia, to Al Jubail, which was the port facility on the kind of northeast coast of Saudi Arabia, meet the maritime pre-positioned ships, participate in the offload of equipment, meaning Humvees, tanks, AAVs, etc., and the 1st Battalion to close on that equipment and stand up in a defensive perimeter around the port. And then we were followed closely by the other battalions of 1st Marine Division who closed as that initial air contingency MAGTAF that was slated to be ready to support that sort of contingency. And so by the end of August, we were sitting in defensive positions, to the northwest of the port at Al Jubail, kind of straddling the Saudi-Kuwaiti freeway, which runs all the way really from Riyadh up through to Kuwait City, 8-lane highway. And so that would be, we knew, the main axis of advance if Saddam Hussein's Republican Guard Corps was ordered to attack further south into Saudi Arabia to seize the oil fields. That whole area is the primary oil fields of Saudi Arabia, down all the way to the Emirates and Bahrain. And so while there, the rest of essentially the entire United States military, give or take a few remain behind units and some reserve units, got deployed to Saudi Arabia over the next 7 to 8 months. And so we spent the majority of that time in the desert. Um, Again, because of that readiness and cohesion priority that then Lieutenant Colonel Madison set, we trained in the desert 90% of the time that we were in Saudi Arabia, from August through December of 1990. And initially, that training, those operations were focused on a defense of that main access down the Saudi-Kuwaiti freeway, along with a variety of counterattack plans, which involved envelopments or flanking attacks coming from the west, from the desert east into the flank of any advancing Iraqi forces. And so we continually practiced that and trained to those tasks, probably up through roughly late October, early November. And then it shifted to attack training. So how are we going to breach the minefields that the Iraqis had in place, two bands of minefields along the Kuwaiti border with Saudi Arabia, and then how do we reduce and destroy Iraqi strong points? Our intelligence, aerial reconnaissance, satellite imagery clearly showed what their defensive plans looked like, and what their strong points looked like, battalion and company level, brigade level strong points. And so our engineers built mock-ups, full-scale mock-ups of these fortifications, and we trained from the platoon level to the battalion level on how to reduce those. And then, in short order, the division, the entire 1st Marine Division, started training on the breach plan for the minefield belts, and then the exploitation north. And it sort of fell down at the platoon level, like battalion tryouts. What battalions are going to be in the assault wave? Because we all sort of went through the same division level training and evaluation of how well the battalion could do a combined arms assault. And so by Christmas time, the decisions were being made as far as who the assault battalions were going to be, and 1-7 became one of the 3 assault battalions of 1st Marine Division. 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, and 3rd Tank Battalion would be the assault breaching force through the minefields. And then our training shifted to rehearsing breaching and passing forces through that minefield. One doesn't simply walk into Mordor. You don't breach complex obstacles like that without rehearsals, training, and specialized equipment, which we were continually fielding, in some cases fabricating the breaching equipment ourselves, and then receiving new and different attachments to the battalion, engineers, mine clearing line charges, tanks, different equipment for the tanks, blades and mine plows. And so doing that very deliberate rehearsal of the sequencing of getting forces through the minefields, because there were two layers to it. And then also, planning on, what happens when you're in between the 2 minefield belts. Doctrinally, since the Iraqis were Soviet trained, that's where they were going to hit you with their artillery. When you're congested, you're stopped in between the minefields. And looking back on it, everybody knows the 100-hour war, and we just cut through them like a knife through hot knife through butter. But at the time, we were expecting and planning for 65% casualties because of that stoppage in between the minefields. And so the need to disperse, to move, to try to make yourself less of a target became a big part of that plan. But in the back of your head was, okay, when's it coming? So we were the first platoon or first unit through the first minefield belt. The plan was that we would do an immediate hard right turn, column right, spread out, get as much dispersion as possible, again because of the exposure to artillery. And we did start taking artillery fire immediately, but it became very clear that it was essentially unobserved, what are called H&I, harassment interdiction fires. And so it was very easy to avoid, no casualties, no damage to any vehicles or equipment. And then we began to pass the breaching elements through and provide security on their right flank, which was their eastern flank, in order to allow them to move up to the second minefield belt and do the same process again of breaching, clearing, proofing, and marking the lane. And once that was clear and open, again, my combined anti-armor team's mission at that point was to move through as rapidly as possible and then push forward, give the battalion room to continue moving through, moving north, and to provide a screen on the right shoulder, so the northeast flank of now the battalion task force moving through, which we did. Took some initial contact with Iraqi tanks. The Iraqis had largely either been killed by the air campaign, the month-long air campaign from really January into February, or surrendered as soon as they saw us, or fled north sometime previously. But there were a few forces who remained, and what they had done is literally dig their tanks and fighting vehicles into turret defilade, or in some cases, main gun muzzle defilade. So they were almost invisible as you started rolling, and then you'd roll up on them, and it seemed that they would take one or two shots at you so they can say they did their job, and then they'd surrender. But still, mostly non-Republican Guard Corps forces, so T-54, 55 tanks, very older Soviet inventory tanks, still with a 105 millimeter main gun. And there was an incident that General Mattis talks about in his book, and some other folks. We were destroying a couple of these tanks that were dug in with our TOW missiles. But one round impacted, a high explosive round impacted close to my vehicle. Didn't do any real damage. A little bit of secondary shrapnel and dust, but from the battalion command post, the battalion command tractor AAV's perspective, from that angle, it looked like my vehicle had blown up. And so later that evening, there was a call for a battalion. It did blow the antenna off my vehicle, so I had trouble communicating after that until I got it replaced. But then later that evening, there was an orders group for the company commanders and independent platoons, anti-armor platoon, and I walked up to General Mattis, and he said, "I thought you were dead." And then from that day to this day, he always greets me with "Good to see you alive." So that was the first time he tried to get me killed. The problem that night was we were in the midst of the Al Wafra oil fields, which, as the Iraqis had left, they set on fire. And so burning sour oil wells produced this billowing, low-hanging cloud of smoke, very wet, oily smoke. It sticks to everything. It's just, obscures all light. And so as soon as the sun went down, it was pitch black. Literally can't see your hand in front of your face black. And so the battalion at that point is in a tactical pause, not moving, doing local security, but you still have to move around and do things. Far too dangerous to move vehicles in numbers So essentially, everyone sit tight and move on foot in order to find the battalion command post, get any fragmentary orders. But it was so dark that night, I literally walked into a tank. It couldn't even see it till my helmet clunked up against the glacis plate, the front of the tank, which scared the heck out of the tank crew. They didn't know what's going on down there. Thought they were being snuck up on by Iraqis, but very dangerous. For kind of hazardous evening. And then when dawn broke, it wasn't much better. Plus, add the lingering concern of chemical weapons. We were all expecting that. So we're all in at the time in MOP 3. So the mission-oriented protective posture, wearing the thick, heavy charcoal suits, rubber, chemical resistant boots. Nothing. The only exception is no gas mask and no rubber, butyl rubber gloves at that point. That's MOP 3. MOP 4, you put all that stuff on. Well, during the night, for one reason or another, false reporting in our testing equipment of chemical agents. And so, gas. Everyone goes to MOP 4. All right, now you're in your gas mask and you're trying to communicate, and no, all clear. Go back to MOP 3. No, it's gas. And so that happened about 3 or 4 times, to the point where, again, anecdotal story. One of the corpsmen in one of the line companies was certain he was experiencing the symptoms of a nerve agent, and so proceeded to immediately give himself the injections, the atropine and 2-PAM chloride injections that you are supposed to give yourself if you've been exposed to a nerve agent. Well, taking those when you haven't been exposed to a nerve agent really messes with your nervous system, and so he made himself a casualty. And it was fine eventually after everything got out of his system. But interesting, just fear factor there of what's really going to happen, the unknown and expectation of those weapons being used against us. But they didn't. And the next day we continued to move. Our next objective was a kind of a resort area called the Emir of Kuwait's Farm. It was sort of an oasis in the desert south, almost due south of Kuwait City, where an Iraqi reinforced battalion had dug in. And the reinforcements were anti-tank guns, very older technology sort of anti-tank weapon. And we had a deliberate attack plan on this strong point, just like we'd been rehearsing. And so my role as the Combined Anti-Armor Team was to provide the forward close-in tactical reconnaissance for the battalion. So we were the first to make contact with the farm, to call in supporting arms, which in this case was an artillery group, which at that time was all of the 11th Marine Regiment, all 5 battalions, mixed calibers of artillery that supported 1st Marine Division. And it was a regimental 9, meaning every gun in the regiment fires 9 rounds at that target, or group of targets. And that was one of the last, certainly my last personal experience of seeing what massed artillery really does on the battlefield, and why it's called the King of Battle. It really hasn't happened at that scale since Desert Shield and Desert Storm. But that group, which was a mixture of DPICM, dual purpose improved conventional munitions, so cluster bombs, and white phosphorus, completely destroyed 99% of the Iraqi forces in that strong point before the 1st Marines even had to close. So after activating that group, my role was to provide suppressive fire, while Charlie Company, Suicide Charlie 17, of famous since Bloody Ridge on Guadalcanal, the Marines and AAVs of Charlie Company moved up and executed the plan to breach and clear that strong point, which they did. Still a few Iraqis there to take as POWs, but most of them had been completely eliminated by that artillery group that was fired. Absolutely awe-inspiring what massed artillery can do in that tactical environment. So from there, a quick consolidation, reorganization, and then the goal was to push through during the third day to Kuwait International Airport. And at this point, it was literally just, set your azimuths, drive north. Navigation was an enormous challenge at that time. We only had the first initial technology of global positioning system navigation. We used a unit that was originally designed for commercial boaters, commercial watercraft, fishermen, etc. It was called a Trimble Trim Pack. It was about the size of a briefcase. Very difficult to program, difficult to use, and the satellite coverage, the satellite constellation at that time, only provided you about 8 to 12 hours a day of information, of navigation equipment to. Now, it was accurate down to about an 8 to 10 digit grid of where you were on the ground, but you never knew when you were going to lose your 8 hours of coverage. And so the old blocking and tackling skills of dead reckoning and plotting positions on maps was key, and my driver and my radio man, Lance Corporals Amison and Brian, were responsible for that piece as we navigated. But by that point, by the third day, you could almost just do it by shooting an azimuth with a lens-added compass, due north, keep moving. My role at that point, again, as that forward reconnaissance screening element, was to maintain the boundary with our neighbors, with the next task force over, which was the other combined arms task force in 1st Marine Division, Task Force Papa Bear, which was comprised of 2 infantry battalions and 1st Tank Battalion, the other tank battalion in 1st Marine Division. And so we had a series of contact points along the route north. A contact point is where 2 units send a patrol, a small detachment, to make physical contact with the adjacent units so that you can coordinate fires along that boundary. Worst case scenario, one unit gets further forward than the other, appears to be ahead of you, that's an enemy unit, and you can have blue on blue very easily that way. So the responsibility for maintaining that boundary was assigned to my CAT platoon, and then within Task Force Papa Bear, 3rd Battalion, 9th Marines CAT platoon, which was commanded by a lieutenant named Frank Donovan, who just got his 4th star and took over U.S. Southern Command. So we were the 2 lieutenants that maintained that boundary between the battalions. Got up to Kuwait International Airport that night, and we sent some patrols out into Kuwait City. Bravo Company, Charlie Company, both sent roughly platoon-sized patrols into the city. And then also we had Kuwaiti interpreters. They were mostly Kuwaiti Air Force officers who had made it out of Kuwait when the invasion happened. And so they had volunteered to be our Arabic interpreters. When we got to Kuwait City, they all left. Where'd they go? They went home. They went to go check on their families and go back to their point of origin, and in some cases take care of some business with Iraqis who were still in the city. We saw some of that, and we saw what some of the Iraqis had done to Kuwaiti citizens as well. So they had largely left by that point. Very interestingly, all around Kuwait International Airport, all of the defensive positions with heavy weapons, artillery pieces, anti-armor pieces, anti-aircraft guns, were all oriented to the east. They were all oriented towards the Arabian Gulf, Persian Gulf at the time. And the intelligence assessment of that is that the fact that we had an entire Marine Expeditionary Brigade on amphibious ships in the Arabian Gulf at the time essentially worked as a diversion or a deception plan with other actions taken by the MEF at the time to convince the Iraqis that what do Marines do? Marines attack from the sea. And so, of course, they were expecting, and our main effort, if you will, for 1 MEF to be an amphibious landing right at Kuwait City. And for obvious reasons, that was a classic example of look at my thumb, gee, you're dumb. They focused on that amphibious assault, and our ground forces were in fact the main effort that cut through their defenses and rolled up into Kuwait City to liberate Kuwait. Within that roughly three and a half day time span. From that point on, there was a lot of reorganization, returning some key attachments to their home. Again, always a challenge because of the navigation. My platoon was tasked with security for some of these units that needed to move around the battle space, and eventually we were then directed to withdraw and essentially did a road march, moved all our forces onto that Saudi-Kuwaiti freeway in Kuwait City and began slowly moving our way south. Again, kind of rainy Persian Gulf winter weather, cold, rainy, and the smoke of those oil fields and other burning structures. There's always fire, just staining everything. So we came out of there. We looked like we were all rigged for night ops. All the vehicles had turned gray and black, and eventually made our way south through Al Khafji, which is really the northernmost city in Saudi Arabia, adjacent to the Kuwaiti border, site of some battles early in the war when the air campaign started. There were battles in Khafji. I had some very close friends who were with 1st Anglico, who were involved in those fights in Khafji. And we rolled through there to staging area to start the return, the wash down and backload of equipment to the maritime preposition vessels. And for those of us who'd been there for almost so August through February, now into March, just waiting for our plane to go home. And eventually we did, backloaded I think about 2 plane loads, commercial air, back to March Air Force Base, and then buses to 29 Palms. Again, kind of winter in the desert there, gray and a little rainy, a little wet, but amazed to see yellow ribbons everywhere, and even up in the small communities like Morongo Valley and Joshua Tree, people out on the side of the road waving flags and kind of coming home for the big win to drive back into 29 Palms and once again discover that they don't have adequate barrack space for everybody, and go on a quick weekend liberty and then come back and start doing the normal post-deployment activities. A lot of the Marines at that point had been stop-lost, so for them the priority for the battalion at that point was to out-process our stop-lost Marines and get them discharged from the Marine Corps in good order, maintain contact with them, and then start rebuilding the battalion for the next deployment. And that became the priority from there on in. And then for those of us who were fairly senior, hey, where's my orders? Where am I going next? And for a lot of us infantry lieutenants, it was sort of one of 3 places. You were either going somewhere back in Quantico to be an instructor at officer candidate school or the basic school, or you were going to the drill field to be a platoon commander, series platoon commander for new recruits, or you were going to the School of Infantry to instruct, to be a company commander for instruction of infantry Marines. with a few exceptions. Some lieutenants always get pulled off to recruiting duty or those sorts of things. I was sent back to officer candidate school to be an instructor, and from summer 1991 to summer of 1994. So FM1, I remember receiving it in the mail, addressed to me from the Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Gray, my own very own copy, when I was a rifle platoon commander on Okinawa. And it was brand new. When I went through infantry officer course, there was a lot of sort of leaning forward academically to teach us what the tenets of maneuver warfare were, reading the precursor books like the Maneuver Warfare Handbook by William Lind. But then it became Marine Corps doctrine in roughly 1989. I received that book. And then it became testable material. You had to, at a minimum, know the definition of Schwerpunkt, culminating point, and coup d'oeil for testing. As far as practicing it, as we looked at how the plan for the combined arms assault breach into Kuwait from Saudi Arabia played out, it may not seem that sort of essentially frontal assault, combined arms, mine clearing, and then exploitation is maneuver warfare. I disagree. Two aspects. Number one, I mentioned, was the deception plan, a layered what we would call now an information plan that that essentially convinced, to the degree necessary, the tactical commanders in Iraq or in the Iraqi Republican Guard that the Marine Corps would of course do an amphibious landing, an amphibious assault from the Persian Gulf into Kuwait City, go directly at or behind their defenses. That's maneuver warfare. The fact that it's a deception is also maneuver warfare. So that's aspect number one. Aspect number two is, even in the assault battalions, I would submit that our use of speed as a weapon is consistent with maneuver warfare. Even when you're doing combined arms frontal attacks, when you're working at speed and bypassing enemy units where possible to maintain and increase that speed, I would say that is certainly consistent with the tenets of maneuver warfare. So it depends on what level you're looking at. There's an old saying, and we used to say it at the time as new lieutenants and old staff NCOs and NCOs now learning maneuver warfare. Everything in maneuver warfare at the small unit tactical level, number one is common sense. I don't want to go with the strongest part of an enemy. I want to go with the weakest part. If I need to make the weak part using combined arms, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put the enemy in a dilemma so that he has no good decisions. Stay put and die from artillery, get up and move and die from direct fire. That's correct. That's correctly applied traditional combined arms. But the second piece to that is, for the individual rifleman, assaultman, machine gunner, everything is a frontal attack. You're going to the front of somebody. If you're lucky, you might surprise him over his right shoulder and he turns, but then it's a frontal attack. So again, depending on what level you're looking at, I would say what the Marine Corps did, what one MEF and the Marine Corps did in Desert Shield, Desert Storm fully embraces the tenets of maneuver warfare. We had excellent intelligence, and because we were facing a Soviet-equipped and armed force, we had even better intelligence down at the small unit, individual Marine level, because we had all grown up in a Marine Corps that was essentially, one of our major missions was going to be to secure the left flank of NATO and fight against the Soviets in Europe. That's why the Marines were in Norway. That was the whole plan. And so the importance of understanding Soviet doctrine, and also understanding the linkage between specific kinds of Soviet equipment, vehicles, and weapons, and what that meant in terms of Soviet tactics, was inculcated in us, especially as lieutenants, from the earliest days of training. So I know if I'm looking at a BTR-60 on the battlefield, I'm looking at the advance guard of the main body of a motorized rifle regiment. And the next thing that's going to show up is probably going to be BMP-1s and BMP-2s. What's a BMP-1? What's a BMP-2? It's an armored personnel carrier. It's extremely vulnerable from the rear and sides and top. It has a main gun with a roughly 1,000-meter range. Our tow missiles have about a 2,500-meter range, so we can kill them at distance. Same thing for their tanks. We knew what units in the Iraqi army had the best tanks, T-72s, and what units in the regular Iraqi army were equipped with. And they were equipped with T-54, 55s and T-62s, much older Soviet tanks, much less capable, much more vulnerable to a mobility kill or a crew kill. My unit, my combined anti-armor team, that was a heavy machine gun platoon with half of a regimental tow platoon attached to it. So roughly 14 vehicles, the bulk of them being tank killers. Again, using the best technology, the TOW-2 Bravo at the time. And so, our first contact, as I'd mentioned, was with those dug-in T-54, 55, T-62 tanks. And when a tank digs into a position like that, it just literally shot itself in the foot. It loses its, one of its most valuable assets on the battlefield, tactical mobility. Okay, and you're now just essentially a sitting target, a bunker. And so for my tow gunners, for Sergeant Chris, Corporal Platzer, they're getting multiple tank kills. And, in some cases, you had, crewmen surrendering. Okay, that's fine. We had standing operating procedures for how to deal with the surrendering Iraqis. We, as the forward reconnaissance element, did not collect them. We essentially directed them back further south to collection points, and they were dealt with by the rifle companies, and then there was an entire task force within the MEF that was strictly there for POW handling and guarding. There was an incident during the movement up to Kuwait International Airport where we were the lead element was moving through a quarry area, an bauxite or aluminum quarry area, and an Iraqi unit attacked us from that quarry. They had BMPs, again armored personnel carriers, and they engaged my platoon in the front, and then the lead elements of Team Tank, Alpha Company, 3rd Tank Battalion, Captain Rick Mancini at the time, leading that organization. And so we began counterattacking. Essentially, they had ambushed us, so we were responding to that armored ambush. That was, again, kills with tows on the larger vehicles. Smaller vehicle engaged the lead element of my platoon. We engaged with machine guns. I forgot to yell fire in the hole to my driver and my radio operator, so that literally scared the crap out of them. I was manning the machine gun and engaged the troops coming out of that vehicle. 50 cal is definitely meant for vehicles, not for human bodies, because it literally just tears them into pink mist. And then we even had a kill in the front with a Dragon, an anti-armor missile one of the slowest weapons on the battlefield. You can almost see the missile moving down range. But the tow platoon came up, or the dragon platoon came up and engaged several bunkers. Again, they couldn't move, so the dragon just mulched them like a bunker, or like a bunker buster. Meanwhile, at the same time, the log train, our logistics train, which at the time was led by Lieutenant, later Colonel Jeff Hooks, and Gunnery Sergeant Kendall Half, who passed away a couple of years ago. They're getting ambushed in the rear. And so now from the battalion headquarters level, you're essentially, you've got two fights going on at the same time. That was probably the most active engagement that we had. A dismounted infantry with anti-tank AT-4 rockets in the rear, or missiles in the rear, and then our tow assets and the tank company, which wound up doing a dedicated movement and destroying just about everything in that quarry. And then we moved on, and then it was time to keep pressing. Again, the priority being speed as a combat multiplier to get out of that area. Again, it's all falling back on your training. There really isn't time to think, and if you do need to think, as a lieutenant, you need to have trained to think. And so the mental rehearsal factor, I can't emphasize enough. And we were blessed, because again, we had that period from August to February, January, February, to train and rehearse and learn. Within my anti-armor platoon, Marines made it a hobby, as they were getting magazines and newspapers in the mail, to cut pictures of Iraqi armored vehicles out of the magazines and tape or glue them onto 3x5 cards and drill each other on what you're looking at. What's that target? Where's the best place to shoot it with a 50 caliber machine gun, with a Mark 19 40 millimeter grenade launcher? Where's the best place to shoot it with a tow missile, or with an AT-4 if it's close in? We had the luxury of thinking about that, doing that, drilling that, training that live fire throughout that months-long period. And the one lesson I took away from that, again, at the time, not knowing I was going to stay in the Marine Corps, but I certainly convinced myself that if I was going to, and I was going to be in that position again, I would never not be prepared. You use the time to prepare, and if you're in charge of a unit and in charge of training, you train like it's your last night apiece before you're going to do this for real. Because you may not have that 7-month-long luxury of building up, and lo and behold, in the rolling start of OIF-1, the quote-unquote march up to Baghdad, we did not have that months of preparation available to us. There were some obviously butchered bodies in the street, both sides. So Kuwaiti civilians, and then some Iraqi soldiers who had been obviously captured and executed. And this is in an environment like that, I would call that it's tragic. It's not unexpected. It's the expected sort of sorting out that's gonna happen in that sort of environment. And yes, it's horrible. And again, just to be clear, it's not like we're catching people in the act. We're seeing the aftermath of it. So yeah, there wasn't that sort of immediacy to it. But when the opportunity is clear, when the opportunity had presented itself, people took advantage of it on both sides. Okay. It's just hard personally to get my head around how long ago it was, because personally it seems like it was yesterday. There are some memories that I have that are vividly clear, and they're of some of the most banal things, but very vivid. It was an opportunity. The Marine Corps up to that point, we had trained in the field frequently for 3 and 5 day increments. We learned that it's easy to live outdoors for 3 to 5 days. 3 to 5 months, you have to really learn your field craft, your field skills, field hygiene, or everybody's going to get sick. You have to learn how to dig latrines. You have to learn how to feed yourselves and wash and keep your hands clean in the field, and that applies to your weapons and your equipment. We think the desert's dry. It is, and it's dusty. So you don't want to put a lot of lubricant on your weapons. So they get bone dry, and then you get rain, and now you're in a rust factory. And so now you've got to constantly maintain those weapons and the ammunition. If you're not cleaning your ammunition, don't expect your weapon to function properly. Doing that religiously every day, and then the role of NCOs and staff NCOs. I had a corporal in the platoon. The role of the NCO is to inspect what the Marines are doing. You inspect what you expect. If you expect the Marines to have clean rounds, clean weapons, clean bodies, somebody needs to check that on a daily basis. That's the role of the NCO in that environment, among many roles. And I had a corporal named Eric Adler who actually took a Sharpie and wrote inspector on his cover, because that was what he did every day, was inspect those Marines. Exactly like he was taught to and like he was expected to. And then that applies further up the chain of command too, to the platoon level and above. Kind of unique within the weapons company organization because the platoons are very independent. The company doesn't all live and work together. But very vivid memories of that time in the desert. And then obviously, despite lack of sleep and adrenaline, vivid memories from the combat in Kuwait as well. But contextualizing my role in history, I'm proud to have been part of that Desert Shield, Desert Storm force that was birthed by Vietnam-era leaders who had stayed in the service after that war and built us to that combined arms force across the services, that joint force, that just beginning to truly be a joint warfighting organization across the U.S. military by the late 80s, early 90s. I'm proud to have been part of that force. I'm proud to have liberated Kuwait. We're still reaping dividends from that in our foreign policy, in our energy policy, and militarily. We have the ability to deploy and train in Kuwait. And I'm proud to have served with those Marines. Again, hard to fathom how long ago it was, but it was long ago, and we're all gray-bearded old men now, and time marches on. But given what we expected, casualties and resistance-wise from the Iraqis, we were blessed not to have that, but we were prepared for it, and I think our families were prepared for it, and that it didn't transpire that way, again, is not by luck. It was because we were that good. So many people, it was a cakewalk in Kuwait. No, we were that good. The planners, the targeteers, the soldiers, sailors, airmen who flew those missions in aircraft that we no longer have in the inventory, and shaped for a month, conducted an air campaign that shaped the battlefield, and then the training and our ability to do combined arms breaching with that equipment, some of which we no longer have, allowed us that victory in the way we did it. And a British colleague of mine, at one point, we shared a boundary with British forces, Task Force Tiger, and the Desert Rats, 1st Staffordshire Regiment, and we did some cross-training with them, and we were also blessed to be fighting Iraqis, because they're not the greatest soldiers in the world.